Hello and welcome to Tim's BMW Repairs and Information. Well, I'm on my way back from work today. Hot day here in the UK in the E31 as always. It's a lovely car to drive, the E31. I much prefer driving this to the E64. Beautiful cabin in here, lovely seats to sit on. And of course this is my second E31, and just the same as my first E31, this came with a 4-spoke steering wheel, and it just didn't suit the car at all. It was enormous. It was one of BMW's first airbag steering wheels, and the steering wheel was as wide as the airbag was as wide as the steering wheel itself. It really just did not look right. So I didn't have it for long before I decided I'd like one of the 3-spoke ones, as is seen in, well, the earlier E31s had a 3-spoke, and so did the CSIs and stuff like that, and the 3-spoke looked great. But if you look up E31 steering wheels, well, on any of the auction sites, they cost an arm and a leg. They're about 300 quid or so. Yeah, as soon as you say E31 8 Series on an auction site, the prices go up amazingly high. So, but what I did notice was that E36 steering wheels look exactly the same, and they are cheap as muck. I mean, in, what was it, 2009 or so, when I first got probably earlier than that, when I got my first E31, they were about 30 quid, and they look nice too. They weren't sort of mangled up ones or anything. They're good looking steering wheels. And not only did I get the steering wheel, I got the airbag and I got the slip ring, all for that much money. There were just so many E36 steering wheels around for more or less no money at all. So I thought, well, you can't go wrong really. And yeah, so I bought an E36 steering wheel and then fitted it to this car. Well, it wasn't exactly straightforward. There were a few pitfalls in doing it, that's for sure. But no, it wasn't hard at all fitting it. And when I got this E31, I did exactly the same thing, because this came with a 4-spoke steering wheel as well. And yeah, fitted another E36 one, and I think it cost me 40 quid that time for steering wheel, airbag and slip ring, well, clock springs they are. And yep, since I've done it once already, it's very easy swap. And so what this video is about is what you need to know to swap over a steering wheel to a 3-spoke one from an E36, because they do really suit this car. Well, important things is there are 3 parts to this, of course, with steering wheels. You've got to have the right hole in the middle, the right number of splines and so on. Excuse me a second. That's better. Yeah, got to have the right splines and the right diameter hole. Now, fortunately, most BMWs have the right number of splines and the right size shaft for the steering column, so most steering wheels fit them. Next up, after that, you've obviously got to worry about the clock spring, which is the interface between the fixed steering column parts, the wiring, and the steering wheel which turns. So there's a method of getting those contacts from the steering column to the steering wheel, and it's called a clock spring. Sometimes it's called a slip ring, but it's not. It isn't copper track and a copper pogo. No, it's a clock spring, and I'll explain what I'm talking about a bit later. Got pictures of those, fortunately. So yeah, the clock spring, and the E36 one, the one which you get for the E36, is slightly different, but not big differences, and it's quite easy to modify the wiring very slightly. And then the third one, of course, is the airbag itself. Now, the E31, if it had an airbag, it was a single stage airbag, and I think most E36 ones, if not all E36, came with a single stage airbag and not a twin stage airbag, and you can't use a twin stage airbag on the E31. The electronics don't match it. Now, it might be thought that you can just wire up the wiring to just one of the detonators in the dual stage airbag, but you can't do that. The way the dual airbags work is quite different to the single stage ones. They can fire one of the detonators, the other detonator, or both of them, and also they can change the timing between firing one and the other. And so a dual stage airbag will really just not do in the E31. You must have a single stage airbag. Now, I think all of the 3-spoke that look like this, they all had a single stage airbag, so you're okay there. But there's another version of the E36 steering wheel which they call the Christmas pudding, because it's got a big lump in the middle, which looks a bit like a Christmas pudding, so that's how it got its name. So another 116i, they always try to beat me up here, and there's no point at all. He's about a mile behind now, that taught him. The Christmas pudding steering wheel, that came with either a single stage or a dual stage airbag on them, and so you've got to make sure you've got the right one. And I'll put drawings up, I'll put pictures up of both the single stage. It's quite obvious they have completely different connectors on them, so you can't accidentally plug in the wiring for a single stage into a dual stage and vice versa. So yeah, they've got completely different connectors, and I'll put up pictures of those. So those are the 3 important things: obviously spline and shaft size, clock spring, and after that the airbag. Now, fortunately, this steering wheel from an E36 is perfect for the task. It's got a single stage airbag, the splines and shaft size are correct, and the clock spring is only slightly different, and then we'll go through what the differences are. And the main difference between this and the original E31 is that the original E31 has a separate slip ring rather than a clock spring for the horn, and so it uses a copper pogo and a copper ring on the back of the clock spring for the horn contact. And of course this E36 one doesn't. So the 4-spoke has copper track, 3-spoke, the actual wires go up the clock spring along with the airbag ones. And but one of the most useful points is that the airbag connector, which comes out of the clock spring, is the same for the 4-spoke and this 3-spoke. So there's no messing about with the airbag connector, because you don't want to be cutting and joining airbag wires. That's not a good thing. And at this point I'll also say that, of course, if you disconnect the airbag connector while the battery is still connected, then you'll get a supplementary restraint system light come up on the instrument panel, and you need diagnostics to reset that. So whenever we fiddle about with an airbag, we disconnect the batteries, leave it 10 minutes or so to discharge the capacitors in the SRS module. And also, final thing I say about airbags is that when you store them, when you take them off, what you do is you always store them the right way up, so this bit's facing upwards. And the reason for that, in the 1 billion to 1 chance that the airbag goes off, and it won't do, not without an electricity joint to it, the airbag will deploy and it'll go pop, make an awful racket, puff out a lot of smoke as well. Whereas if you put them upside down, it'll go bang, but it'll also shoot off the airbag housing at quite a great velocity, quite a lethal speed. So you never store these face down, because then it becomes a bit of a hazard. Okie dokes. Well, yeah, I mean, I really love the 3-spoke steering wheel. It's got the old places to put your thumbs. Not only that, you can get ones which have been refurbished. Now there's oodles of people doing that. There used to be a bloke in Poland who used to refurbish them, but I've had a quick look on eBay. There's just loads of them, and you can get all sorts of finishes on. You get one with a red line in the middle. Not quite sure why. To tell you that the steering wheel's pointing the right way, I've no idea. But you do get the red one and a fatter leather on it and all sorts of things. They do really look smart, but I quite like the way this one looks as well. Sort of bog standard, rather suits the car. You can get nice ones with wood. Oh, you can get ones with a flat bottom on them. Why you'd want a flat bottom steering wheel in an E31, I've no idea. It beats me, that one. And you can also get wooden ones, well, wood finish on them, and they don't suit the E31 at all. They suit the E38 and the E36 quite nicely, but not the E31 really. Anyway, it's all down to your choice. If you buy one of those refurbished ones, they always come without the airbag and without the clock spring. Now, the reason I would always buy a steering wheel with the clock spring is that they are quite different to each other, have subtle differences, and it may be that it's just not going to fit. Now, someone will know that what the differences are, but no, the connectors are different in some of them, and the wiring's different. Some of them even have 3 slip rings on the back of them, 3 copper slip rings. Amazing. So they must have 3 pogos on them. Yeah, absolutely amazing. So yeah, all sorts. So if you can, I'll put up pictures of what the E36 one looks like, and then you can check pictures and so on. Yeah, but that's why I'd always buy the E36 steering wheel with the slip ring and the airbag, because then you can be absolutely sure they all match each other and you're not going to have any problems doing it. Now, there is an eBay seller that does sell the airbags separately, right, for the E36, and I'll put a link up there, and it right for the E31 and so on, and I'll put links up for that. Right, well, we're home. Rather an uneventful drive for a change. Right, see you later. So I thought what we'd do is we'll have a quick look on eBay and see if there's any suitable steering wheels for sale. First of all, that I've just bought that, because mine was getting a bit worn out up here, so I'm going to give this a go, put it on YouTube. There's, looking straight away, that's a non-airbag steering wheel as far as I can tell, and so I would bypass that. It is a nice looking, well, I don't know, it's all fluffy, been redone, and not an airbag, but it has got a slip ring, so that's suitable for a non-airbag. But that's the old 4-spoke, but that hasn't got an airbag in it either, because the airbag ones have an embossed BMW on it, and they never have badges on, although I've seen them stuck on, because when the airbag goes off, that hits your face, so you don't want that in your face, so never retrofit that. It's an interesting steering wheel. Now, this one has got an airbag, but it just doesn't suit the E31 because all the airbag electronics, which is why it's got this bit that says airbag at the bottom, all the electronics and the sensors and everything are built into the steering wheel. It's absolutely amazing. So this was used on cars that didn't have a SRS system, a supplementary restraint system fitted, but you could get an airbag on the steering wheel because everything was inside it. So look at that, it's got 3 slip rings, one for the horn, 2 for electricity, so one would be ground, one would be 12 volts, the other one would be the horn. So yeah, all fully self-contained, but the SRS light would come on. Right, have a quick whiz through. Where's the one I saw earlier? Here we go. This is a slam dunk for the E31. Looks okay, could do with a good polish. It's got an airbag, got a clock spring, got the correct wiring, so that's coming out of the clock spring. Those pair there, that's the horn, brown for the horn, blue for earth, and that's the airbag one, and it will have the orange connector on it, so that will connect directly to the airbag connector on the E31. So that one is entirely suitable. Very nice altogether. That's all sorts of things. See if we can find a pudding. A Christmas pudding. Here's a Christmas pudding. Let's have a quick look what we got. Well, you've got the right connectors in there. Got the right clock spring. Look at that. That's fine. So there's the horn wires coming out to a two-way. And for fitting it on the E31, we chop that off. We join that to the horn pogo connector. And we join that with a little eye to a ground point. And that connector is the direct fit for the E31 airbag connector. So we don't have to snip anything. The airbag is a single stage. Look, it's got 2 pins, one there. So that's a single stage airbag. Perfect. So if you want a Christmas pudding, that's one to go for. And yeah, there's quite a few suitable ones here. Look, there's the original one. 4-spoke steering wheel, rare. Oh, everyone's got them in the sheds. I have. So yeah, embossed thing, because you didn't want the badge hitting your face. Doesn't seem to have, I couldn't find the wiring for the slip ring. I mean, it's got a slip ring on it, but where's the wiring for the airbag? I've got a feeling it's been chopped off. So that is a complete waste. So you can't use that. Been greased up quite substantially over the years. So yeah, unfortunately the idiots chopped off the blimmin' wiring. So that's a fat lot of good. Okie dokes. What we'll do next, oh look, there's another one. That's quite a nice one, isn't it? Worn out at the top, of course, same as mine. No clock spring, so I wouldn't bother with it. Could find a clock spring to match it, but I'd much rather buy one. In fact, that's a clock spring. What? 250 quid for a clock spring? Look, that's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. It's the right clock spring, mind you, but that's just stupid. What about another Christmas pudding? We got no clock spring, no clock spring, and the right one as well. Can't zoom in on that. So that's the airbag connector, or is it? No, that's the airbag connector. So no, strange wiring. It looks like it's been joined together. No, I'd avoid that like the plague. Horrible. So that's how we go round checking. Must get them with a clock spring. And the reason you must get them with the clock spring is the clock spring's got to match the steering wheel. Always buy them with the clock spring fitted, then you can be sure it's going to fit and you can have a look at it and say, 203 quid for a clock spring, for goodness sake. Well, that looks weird as well. That looks like wrong colours. It's got a ground thing that might fit, but I don't think. No, that isn't suitable. So, oh yeah, here's the other end. That is the correct connector for the E31, and that's the chop off those two, and that would fit. But 203 quid? Are they joking? You can get them on the back of steering wheels. With steering wheels that cost you 100 quid. Right, airbags. You can get this bloke here who just sells, just all he does seem to do is sell airbags. So he obviously sells the steering wheel and takes the airbags off of them. So that's a single stage, so that's fine. Righty-ho. Now let's get into the refurbished one. So here's a refurbished. Where does this bloke live? Outside the UK, could be anywhere. So yeah, this is the ones you come across. It's got the silly red thing on it, but it is the right model for our cars, and it generally don't come with the airbag, so I have to buy the airbag and then you have to buy the clock spring. But it's a darn sight cheaper to buy another steering wheel for 100 quid. Because at least you can be sure you've got the right clock spring for it. So if I wanted a refurbished one like one of these, I think what I'd do is I'd buy one of these fellas. We'll say, look, lovely, they've been done, apart from the stupid red thing. Looking good condition, perfect, M Sport stuff stitched in it. I'd buy that, and I'd buy... Lost it now, but yeah, the one I was looking at earlier on, there we go. So for 100 quid, I'd get an airbag and I'd get a clock spring. So that would be great. So 100 quid and whatever it was for that other steering wheel. As long as they don't say they're going to remove anything. You know, wheel and airbag, dispatch. Okay, so this last section is, I was starting to look at multifunction steering wheels, and I know one person or at least one who's fitted a multifunction to the E31, but I will tell you it's not as simple as you'd have thought, because there you go, you've got a E46 steering wheel, looks quite like the E31's. In fact, it looks exactly the same apart from these bits across here. But the problem is that the clock spring wasn't an exact fit. That was the problem. Clock spring didn't fit properly. Well, first of all, you couldn't use the standard clock spring if you wanted to get the signals out of it, because obviously it's got a lot more wires. It's obviously got 2 wires for the airbag, and we'd have to make sure it's a single stage as well. So you'd have to use a different clock spring, and with the clock spring, use the clock spring for this steering wheel, because that would match the Boss, but then the back end of it's different, or something like that. But there's a lot of sticking it up on the mill and milling bits off of it. So, I mean, the electronics, well, being an electronics engineer, would be able to sort this lot out, because they're iBus stuff. But it was the machining that was the problem, so that's what put me off fitting a multi-function steering wheel. I'd be interested to see the clock spring, see if it bore any resemblance, but they don't seem to have. Oh, look, there's an E46 M Sport steering wheel. It looks just like ours, 3-spoke, but it's been refurbished, hasn't it? That's why it's 180 quid. Right, yeah, so multifunction steering wheel can be done. Lots of trouble. And unless I can find a picture of the clock spring, which I can't see one, I wouldn't be able to tell you what the problems were. That's a 318 E46, yeah, so that's the multifunction. Doesn't look in great condition, doesn't it, really? Oh, and it's a dual stage. Okay, so this is the the most important part. 2 connectors, that's a dual stage airbag. Completely different, and as I said on the prelude bit, you might think you can just plug into one of them and it'll go bang from one, but that isn't how dual stage airbags work. They can either fire that one or fire that one, fire both of them, or fire that one first and that one next, fire that one first and that one next. The electronics is completely different. This does not match a single stage airbag detonation system. So E46, especially of that age, wrong. Okay, so that's it for me for the multifunction one. I'd have loved to put the old multifunction stuff on. And on the net somewhere there is someone who did it and did it very well. But that's not my plan. I think quite happy just having an E36 steering wheel with the correct airbag, correct clock spring. Very easy. So anyway, that's how we whiz through steering wheels, just to see if we can find anything useful. E36. And yeah, so you can get have a Christmas pudding, or the 3-spoke, the slim one, which is what I've got. So that's exactly what I've got in my car. Cheap one of those, and that clock spring. So quickly finally say, that's the horn, blue and brown. That's the airbag. Goes in the hole, but they've just stuffed it in the hole. On the end of that will have an orange connector, and on the end of that will have a 4 or 5-way Molex connector, which you chop off. Rightio, so that's it. Let's get on with the job. Right, let's go right from the start of fitting the E31 steering wheel, and it's a E36 steering wheel. I've got all the pictures and everything and the routine on MeekNet, so we'll have a look at it. So there's the original steering wheel, 4-spoke with a good old embossed BMW bit in the middle. And you must admit, I mean, it just doesn't suit the car really, does it? But it was BMW's first airbag steering wheel, so you've got to give them a bit of slack. So there we go, there's the steering wheel and the lovely chrome bit I got from eBay for 30 quid. First and the second one were both the same, so I've done this twice now. It's slightly different the second time, but I'll go through all of that. Right, though, first things we've got to do is we've got to make sure we can get to the battery negative terminals, because we've got to disconnect the batteries at some point, but we don't disconnect them yet because we need to turn the steering wheel. And if you ever tried to turn a BMW E31 steering wheel with the engine not running, you'll fully understand. So you move the right and left carpets, and that gives you access to the negative terminals, but don't disconnect them yet. So the next thing you do is you remove the bottom and the upper halves of the steering column, single screw, top and bottom, with a little blind rivet. That's the things there, and you can pull the rivets out if you like, or you can lose them later. And then it seems easy. You just put in a trim tool between the two halves of the plastic, give it a quick tweak, and it will come apart. No, it won't. No, it doesn't want to come apart too much, and you'll spend a bit of time tweaking bits of trim tools from both sides, and all of a sudden it makes an awful cracking noise like you've completely broken it, and it'll just pop in half. And you just drop the steering wheel down to get the upper half off, and lift the steering wheel up to get the lower half off. And yeah, it's not pretty. So there's the top half coming off. You can see it's got little clips that go into the steering column metalwork. And yeah, and then the bottom half off. Right, let's have a closer look at what's going on the original steering wheel. Right, here's the steering wheel, here's the clock spring. So this part stays still because it's got a loom coming out of it. The inner part of it actually turns. First of all, we've got an airbag loom coming out of the 4-spoke steering wheel, and that's simple. Just go straight into this connector pair, and we can just disconnect this, and then we can get rid of the airbag loom. That's sorted. Now, on the back of an E31 steering wheel, it's got this, what's called a pogo. It's a sprung contact with a bit of brass on the end. And what that does is it mates with a circular track on the back of a steering wheel. And that's the E36 one, so you won't see it. But we saw it earlier on. So it's got a sliding track round here. That's the horn pogo. And this, fortunately, has got a connector in line with it, which we can disconnect, and that'll be handy later on. Okie dokes, so the next thing we'll do is we'll actually remove the steering wheel, and these are the two Torx bolts, which you have to get up from behind, and it's the same on the 3-spoke as it is on the 4-spoke. So we start up the engine, we turn the steering wheel 90 degrees clockwise, remove one Torx bolt, turn it 180 degrees the other way, remove the other Torx bolt. The airbag's ready to come out, but don't disconnect it, it's still connected. Get it dead in the centre, disconnect the batteries. Well, obviously switch the engine off, leave it a few minutes, and then disconnect the batteries. Right, so yeah, we're ready. We've got the airbag hanging off, and switch the engine off, leave it for 10 minutes or so for the SRS module to sort of discharge all its capacitors, and then disconnect the airbag loom, and there we go, we're ready to get the steering wheel off. It's exciting as that. So yeah, we've disconnected the battery, so yeah, that's the negative terminals off. Don't fiddle with the positive terminals at the other end, no point at all, you only end up upsetting yourself. So here we go, Bob's got hold of the steering wheel, that's me mate Bob, and I've got a wrench on it, about a foot long extension, and that's quite enough to get that bolt undone, as it is a bolt. Rightio, so we get that undone, and before we pull the steering wheel off, we get it back in the centre again, so it's absolutely facing straight forwards. Yeah, we either whack it with a centre punch right there, or put a mark on it, and that will make sure that if we have any problems further down the line, we can always put the 4-spoke back on and get it back in the centre. So it's just a sort of insurance that we get it in the centre. Rightio, so once we've done that, we can just pull off the steering wheel, disconnect the airbag connector, this one here. This is off the E36 steering wheel, by the way, not the E31. Disconnect that. Of course, the horn slip ring disconnects itself. It's just a slip ring and a pogo. So ours is slightly different. So this is the E36. That is the same. That's the airbag connector. This is different because we don't have a slip ring on the back of the clock spring here. So it has a separate 2 wires which goes up the clock spring for the horn. So what we do is we chop off this connector because that's not going to plug into anything. So there's the back of the E31 steering wheel showing the slip ring. So it's got a copper slip ring which connects to the horn, and it's got the same connector we've already looked at. Right, so on the steering column we've got a pogo, which is this thing here. It's got a sprung brass contact which connects to that spinning copper thing on the back of the E31 steering wheel and conducts the horn through it. Now, very fortuitously, if that's the correct word, it's got a connector pair. So what we can do is we can disconnect the connector pair on the horn and then get the pogo out. So there's the pogo out. And I did this slightly different to my first one. The first one is different to the second one. On the second one, I cut this here so I could reuse this connector pair. It'll make sense in a minute. And then we have to remove the location pin. Now this locates in the back of the clock spring and stops the clock spring turning with the steering wheel. Now the E36 steering wheel for some reason has that on the other side, just to make things awkward. And you can't turn the steering wheel round, the clock spring round to reach it, because then the self-cancelling doesn't work on the indicators. So you can get this bracket, this U-shaped bracket with the hole at the other side. And it's really just a case of pulling this out, the original one, and fitting it on the new one, and will locate on the back of it. I didn't do that. I used a different method, which we'll get to in a minute. So here's the E36 steering wheel, and there's the location place where that white bit of plastic would go in, stop the clock spring rotating. And of course it's on that side on the E31, so you can't use that alignment device. And there we can see the wires coming out of the E36 clock spring, 2 for the horn, brown and the blue. Blue is ground, brown is the horn, and then 2 wires for the airbag. So there we go, that's got all of that sorted out. Right, so yeah, there's the wires from the E36 steering wheel. Now here's an interesting point. When you remove the bolt from the centre of either of the steering wheels, this bit of plastic pops out. Now the reason for that is that it then locks the clock spring so it can't rotate and can't be damaged. Because if you rotate a clock spring past its final point, then they'll snap. So this holds the clock spring stationary. But the clock spring's only got about 6 turns on it. That means if you turn it fully anti-clockwise, and you'll get 6 turns clockwise. And the way you set them up is you set them up so they're in the middle position. So what we do is we press this bit of plastic and we turn the clock spring on the E36 wheel until it reaches the end. So you can feel it very gently touch the end. Turn it backwards 3 turns, let go of the bit of plastic. We are now in a position where the clock spring can go 3 turns clockwise, 3 turns anti-clockwise, and that's all the travel it needs. So if you forget to do this, you'll turn your steering wheel and snap will go your clock spring. So don't forget to do that. Now, that's what I did the first time. I put a connector pair on, didn't do it the second time. Thought of a much better idea of just connecting up the wire. And first one, I put all the wiring through the hole where the horn pogo was. Didn't do it the second time. What I did on the second time was, here's the wires coming out of the back of the E36 steering wheel. I've tie wrapped it to a loom and tie wrapped it round the eye where the pogo was. And now what I've done is Right, last look at this before we move on. There's the 4 wires coming out of the steering wheel clock spring. 4 wires, orange, white. They're the airbag. You can tell they are because they go to an orange connector. And that connector was the same on the 4-spoke as it is on the 3-spoke. So I didn't have to do any wiring changes for that. 2 further wires, a brown and a blue. The blue is ground, and I've connected it to a ground eye up here. There, just there. So I've connected that to ground. And the brown wire I've put into the original connector, which was a sprung contact for the copper ring on the back of the original steering wheel. So it's all the wiring you've got to worry about. So it's all quite straightforward. Right, so what we do is then we refit the airbag connector, flop it into position so it's all ready to go. And then what we'll do, we make sure everything's connected, make sure the airbag connector is connected, reconnect the batteries, start the engine up, turn the steering wheel 90 degrees, do up one of the bolts, turn it 180 degrees, do up the other bolts, and that's it. The steering wheel is on and looking lovely. Now we just need to fit the housings back on. Sounds easy, not easy. I'll show you a bit of video of me trying to put it on. Right, well this is going to be fun. I can see it happening straight away because this thing is just such a fiddle to get back on. There's the expanding rivet on the bottom half. I'm going to take that out. That might make it a bit easier to get on. So yeah, there's a few bits I've got to get round. That's where one of the stalks goes. Oh, it's the cruise control stalk goes in there, I think. Yeah, it looks like a cruise control stalk. And these rubbery bits, they obviously have to go inside these pockets. And they just sort of shadow off the sort of inner workings. So, let's get all this back in. That's ready to go in. Steering wheel back up and working still. Good. Well, that was a bit of a palaver, wasn't it, to be honest? But anyway, we've had a good look at the wiring and I've refreshed my memory about where all the wires go. I've got all my rubbery bits still in the right place. That's good. Nothing trapped. Screws in, blind rivets in. Good. Right. And that's it. Job done. So you do the screw from the top, screw from the bottom, squeeze it all together, make sure these rubbery bits are in, and that's it. Lovely. That's my first E31 and this is on my current E31, both with the little chrome doofers, and that's how it is today. Looks lovely. Yep, so that's really all there is to it. We're out. There we go then, 3-spoke steering wheel fitted. Ooh, tractor. No wonder people are going very slowly. Yep, I much prefer it to the 4-spoke. It really suits the car so much better. It really is a nice steering wheel. Got little places to put your thumbs. Yeah, it's a nice steering wheel, and I've got that restoring stuff so I can get the shine back on it again. As I said, I've sort of wore it out a bit because shut the big gates at work. I have to put Spirigel on my hands and get back in the car, and my hands are still sort of damp with Spirigel and it sort of lifts the leather a bit. Not quite sure why, but there you go. Yeah, and it's not too arduous a job really, is it? It's just a case of knowing what bits to fit and making sure you get the right clock spring and the right airbag. There are all sorts of other combinations of steering wheel you can use, but I don't know enough about it. and I have seen other steering wheels sort of forced to fit by sticking them up on a mill and cutting large lumps out of them. I can't really remember what that one was about at all, but it was a bit excessive. And I like a multifunction steering wheel as well, but I really don't know enough about the clock spring on them. It's quite possible the clock spring will mechanically fit on the steering column, but obviously the wiring's going to be completely different because there's the extra wires for the I-bus for the steering wheel controls, and of course the one we looked at also had a dual stage airbag, so that wouldn't have been suitable for the E31 just because of that. And that's something you really got to check when you're looking at steering wheels on eBay. Make sure that it's got a single stage airbag. You can't get the dual stage to fit on an E31. It just isn't safe. Well, that's if you're going to use an airbag, because sometimes it comes down to personal choice whether you've got an airbag on it. Right, there we go, job all done. I'm on my way home from work. It's been a boiling day today. Crikey, it's been hot. And yeah, E36 steering wheel, lovely. Fits the palm of the hand perfectly. I much prefer it to the 4-spoke. But really, that's just my opinion. I'm sure some people love the 4-spoke ones. But the airbag was quite big on them. But you got to give BMW their due. It was one of the very first airbag steering wheels, so it was a whopper. And I had exactly the same one on my E32, which was an old 730, and I love that car. And yeah, exactly the same steering wheel. I think it really suited the E32 much better than it did the E31. This smaller steering wheel really suits the E31 a lot better with its sort of sporty credentials. Not that it's any faster than an E38 of course, or an E32, but I think this 3-spoke suits the look of the rest of the car perfectly, and I'm very happy with it. And when you're looking for stuff on eBay, just go through all the stuff that I've said on this video. Make sure you get the clock spring, steering wheel and airbag in one go if you can. And if you want one of the refurbished steering wheels, then get it in this shape, the 3-spoke one, and then buy a separate steering wheel, which you can get them really cheaply with the airbag and the clock spring on them, and then you won't have any problems. So that's quite a cheap way to get one of the custom made steering wheels, is to buy a cheap 3-spoke from an E36 and then spend 200 quid on a lovely finished steering wheel. But to be honest, I quite prefer this. I don't really want a red thing in the middle or anything like that. No, this suits the car nicely. It suits the age of the car. Now, I would have liked the multifunction steering wheel, but of course we came up across the dual stage airbag at one point, and then I wouldn't be surprised if the clock spring mechanics at the back of it are suitable so that it fits the steering column of the E31. Got no doubt about that. And then there'd be certain messing about with the wiring to get the airbag connector out, and that's not too much hard work. You could obviously use the airbag connector that was on the original steering wheel and then just solder it on and heat shrink it on, and that will do the job nicely. So it's not the end of the world. It's possible to put a multifunction steering wheel on the E31, but then of course you're going to have to mess about with little, I think some people do produce modules for the E31 which will then take the signals, the iBus signals from the steering wheel, and then convert it to operate, for instance, the cruise control. And then unfortunately you have to have the correct radio if you want the iBus to control the volume, and this old Becker one I don't think is suitable. I don't think it ever had iBus volume control on it, so you couldn't use it for that. So that would be a bit of a waste of time, and I don't see any reason to have the cruise control on the steering wheel I much prefer it on a stalk compared to modern cars like my daughter's. Yeah, she's got a 116i Sport with the multifunction steering wheel, and of course the buttons are weird for doing the cruise control, whereas when it's on the stalk you can just give it a thump to engage it and disengage it. I much prefer it that way. And there we go then, that's it. Well, thanks for all the comments, by the way. I really enjoy reading them. I don't mind if you're a bit rude to me. I'll delete them. I won't really, no. No, I really enjoy reading the comments and helping out if I can. I mean, that was the whole idea of MeetNet. So yeah, keep the comments coming, and please subscribe, and thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. There we go. Another day over. Another week over. Thank goodness for that.